Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
And I'm Jay Stu.
And today we're talking about Star Trek, released in 2009, directed by J.J. Abrams, written by Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, and starring Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Simon Pegg, Anton Yelchin, Carl Urban, John Cho, Eric Bana,
Bruce Greenwood.
Bruce Greenwood, thank you. And Leonard Nimoy. And Chris Hemsworth. Before he was...
Introducing
Chris Hemsworth. Before he was the Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, this was his first feature film. Nice.
That's awesome. It's funny because I watched this today with commentary. I'd seen this movie enough times. I was like, I don't necessarily need to rewatch it, but I want to... Maybe I'll learn something with the commentary. And They don't even mention him by name in the commentary. They just said that they cast an actor who kind of looks like Chris Pine. And so, like, they don't even... clearly, when they made the... when they recorded the podcast, when they recorded the commentary, he had not blown up yet. And so they were just like, yeah, that actor, we cast him because he kind of looks like Chris Pine. And people, because Chris Pine also wasn't very, a known actor yet.
No, this was the first thing I had seen
right.
Him in.
I had seen him in one other thing. It was called Smokin' Aces. Okay. But he's almost unrecognizable in that movie compared. I mean, it's just. I remember. I think I heard that Chris Pine had been cast as Kirk, and so I looked him up on IMDb and saw that he was in Smokin' Aces, and I was like, really? Mm-hmm. So I rewatched the movie, and was like, oh, interesting. That guy's gonna be Kirk. Okay. But anyway, they were talking about in the commentary, like if you're not familiar with Star Trek and you don't know who Chris Pine is, although if you'd seen the trailer, but they were, the part in the very beginning where he says, you're the captain now, Mr. Kirk. Mm-hmm. People are thinking, oh, okay, well, that's Kirk. That must be Chris Pine, but it's not. It's Chris Hemsworth playing.
Yes.
Father Kirk, George Kirk, I guess, right?
Yes, George Kirk.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, Stu, but I saw this in the theater, like opening night. I was stoked.
I did not.
Yeah,
I did not. I actually don't remember the first time I watched this movie.
Really?
Yeah. I know I've only seen it a handful of times. I'm currently watching it now. This is my 5th time seeing this movie, but I don't remember where I was or what I was doing the first time I saw it.
Did you just not have an interest in seeing it in the theater? Were you just like, Star Trek? Because I know you said your brother used to watch Star Trek, right?
Yeah, my brother used to watch The Next Generation. My mom used to watch the OG, but I never really had a love for Star Trek. I would just watch it if it was on.
Right.
And I had a very surface level knowledge. I still kind of have a very surface level knowledge of it because I haven't seen any of the movies other than the Kelvin timeline. But I want to say I rented it from the library.
Oh wow.
And that was during the time where I was watching a lot of movies.
Right.
Sure. I was for that year I was probably watching 3 or 4 movies a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
So most of the movies that I've seen in my life happened in that time.
I got you.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this movie. But the last few times that I've watched it twice now for this recording.
Yeah.
And my enjoyment for it has gone up tremendously.
Yeah. It knocked my socks off. I was excited for it anyway because I had started to kind of get in. I mean, I've told this story, I think, every time we do a Star Trek movie, but I'd started to get into Star Trek before this movie came out, but just I just had started to scratch the surface. I had seen the original movies, and I think I even watched the Next Generation movies, but I had really only started to watch the original series. I hadn't gotten into Next Generation yet by the time this movie came out. And then seeing this movie made me want to go, like, it took me forever to get through the original series. Like, I only just now, within the last year or two, finally finished the original series.
How long is the OG?
It's only 3 seasons, but the first 2 seasons, I want to say, are like 30 episodes each or something like that. And they're long. They're 50 to like 55 minutes or something. Like, they just didn't have quite as many commercials back then.
Huh.
And so some of the episodes are, I mean, I love the OG series, but some of those episodes can feel long. You know what I mean? And so it's just not.
Is it a lot of talking?
Yeah, I mean, there's, and the action back then was like a fist fight or something. You know, it wasn't like this movie.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was made in the 60s. It's fun. It's nostalgic. It's cool, but it's not something I could sit there and just watch episode after episode after episode. Like, I'd watch one episode and be like, okay, that I'm good for today, you know. And it just took me a long time to get through it. But after this movie, I wanted to watch so much more of it, and I ended after this movie. I actually went to the bookstore and bought my first Star Trek novel and read and I remember reading it at work, and a coworker came up and was like, "What are you reading?" And I showed him. It had Spock on the cover, and he was like, "Oh God." He's like, "You're becoming one of them."
Oh, Trekkie.
Yeah, basically. And now there's still some Star Trek I haven't seen. I'm still kind of slowly getting through some of those series. I've watched all of the original series. I've watched all of Next Generation. And now I'm getting through Deep Space Nine and Voyager. I have not seen any of Enterprise. And then I've watched the new stuff. But
I've seen a little bit of Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a very little bit, maybe like 1 or 2 episodes.
Right. I've seen the pilot, actually, so I have watched the pilot of Enterprise. But yeah, so I have my love for Star Trek, I feel like, has just grown over the years. And I think this movie kind of helped that. You know, I think this movie I went from, like you said, like a surface level fan maybe to being much more of a Star Trek fan. And I think I have this movie to kind of thank for that, because I had gotten into it, but this movie really put it into overdrive, I think, for me.
Yeah.
And I saw this movie. You said you've seen this movie about 5 times. I think I saw it 5 or 6 times in the theater. So I went back and saw it a bunch. I love this movie.
Going back to what you said about the lack of action in the OG, it kind of makes sense, because what I understand about Star Wars, they're not that type of crew. They're explorers, so
right.
They're not really a kind of equipped to go on the offense. I think they have like just enough to defend themselves.
Right. I mean, the Enterprise definitely has a good weapon system, but Star Trek, I feel like, is a lot more about like moral dilemmas and things like that. And so it's less about,
spectacle.
Right. And it's more about kind of the problem solving and things like that. And there, in the original series, Kirk obviously did get into fist fights here and there and stuff, but it was more about, Gene Roddenberry, when he created Star Trek, wanted to really have like a hopeful look at the future. And so he didn't really want to have like a whole lot of violence on the show. But obviously there still has to be conflict in order, otherwise it'd be boring.
Right.
And so I feel like the original series and even Next Generation is kind of very similar to that, which is why I think as a kid I thought it was so boring. Because it was just a lot of dialogue and very little action and stuff. And I remember when this movie came out, you remember The Onion? There was like the fake news.
Yeah.
They had a YouTube, I don't know if they still have a YouTube channel or not, but they had a YouTube channel, and they did like a fake news thing that said Star Trek fans hated this movie because it was fun and enjoyable or something like that,
That's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Because
this movie is very fun. Like,
it
is. It's surprisingly fun. Like, I didn't expect to have as much fun as I did.
Me neither. I mean, I thought the trailer was really good, and so I was really excited for it. But seeing it it was one of those rare times where the movie was better than the trailer,
Yeah.
And I remember as soon as it ended, I remember thinking, I want to watch that again. Like, it was just, it blew me away. It was my favorite movie that year, I'm sure. 2009, probably. I'd have to go back and see what else came out that year, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was my number 1 movie that year. Before we kind of get into the story, let's talk about the cast a little bit. So I went back and listened to a little bit of our episode that John and I did on Into Darkness, which was episode number 6. So it was about 9 years ago. And I talked briefly about when the casting came out for this movie. I remember being a little disappointed because it felt to me like they were just casting big name actors and not necessarily people who were right for the role. And the only person that was kind of an unknown to me was Chris Pine. But Zachary Quinto I knew from Heroes. He was kind of unknown. Like, unless you watched Heroes, you didn't really know who he was.
Yeah, but, he was new.
Right. But John Cho, Anton Yelchin, Carl Urban, Simon Pegg, and even Zoe Saldana. Maybe less Zoe Saldana, but those guys, I knew those guys from other stuff, and I was like, especially Carl Urban, I was like, really?
Yeah,
Carl Urban as Bones?
Everything.
Yeah, and he's not, and up until this movie, he had not really been like a comedic actor. He had done Lord of the Rings and The Bourne Supremacy, I think it was Supremacy. And a couple other things. And I was just like, I just did not see him as Bones. I was like, what are they doing for this movie? And then seeing it in the theater, everybody was perfect. Carl Urban especially just blew me away.
This cast is really good. Like I said, I haven't seen the OG, so I have nothing.
You can't really compare it.
Compare other than Kirk, because I think everybody's seen some capacity of William Shatner's James T. Kirk, but
yeah.
But yeah, I had nothing to compare it to, but I knew watching this movie, I was like, this feels right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tonally, I don't know if it's accurate. I don't think so. But as far as the characteristics of the characters, it feels
they nailed
right.
It for sure. Yeah, I mean, so now that I've actually watched the entire original series, and I've gone back and rewatched the original movies a couple times, Zachary Quinto as Spock shows a little bit more emotion than Leonard Nimoy used to. Leonard Nimoy used to be very stone-faced. You really couldn't read him. There were episodes where something got into him or something, and he showed anger, but like it wasn't. You couldn't read him really at all. And I feel like Zachary Quinto doesn't quite do that. He shows a lot more emotion on his face than Leonard Nimoy does. And so for a little while, I was like, God, it kind of bothers me, because like Spock is supposed to be, but in this movie, he has a lot of emotional stuff kind of happen to him. And so, I think it's appropriate, actually.
It is. I'm glad you brought him up. Spock is my favorite character in the movie. For that reason, he's supposed to, the Vulcans, I guess, are supposed to like just suppress their emotion and kind of just manage their impulses,
right?
And he struggles so much trying to do that.
Right.
He is easily the most conflicted character in the movie, and I love it. He is so well written and perfectly cast for that type of character. Zachary Quinto, he nails Spock. I love the subtle little eye movements he does to kind of convey what emotion he's feeling, whether it be anger or uncertainty. It's just little things that he does to remain emotionally in check,
right?
But to make the viewer aware that he's feeling something different than what he was feeling before.
Right.
And I really, I like everybody in this movie.
Yeah.
Chris Pine, of course, he's awesome as Kirk, and I really love the dynamic between Kirk and Spock, especially their character arcs, because they're kind of like going in the opposite direction. It kind of reminded me of Captain America and Iron Man in the MCU, how their arcs kind of go in the opposite direction. Because you kind of see a little bit of the other person in each of them.
Right.
So Kirk is very impulsive, but he's very, very intelligent and strategic. And he thinks outside the box. He's definitely a maverick.
Right.
Whereas Spock is he's also strategic and calculative, but he kind of operates on probability, whereas
and logic.
Yeah, probability and logic, whereas Kirk he uses his instinct, but only to an extent, because he's still very smart. He doesn't go purely on instinct.
Right.
So it's kind of the difference between, or the subtle difference between probability and likelihood.
Right.
So I just thought that was a really smart way to show kind of two sides of the same coin between those two characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think you also, I mean, you made a really great point. This movie does a fantastic job of showing us how these two characters need each other. You know, because Spock alone would probably be an adequate captain of a starship, you know, but he would be too logical, and he would maybe
he would alienate his crew.
Right. And Kirk, if he didn't have Spock with him, would maybe be a little too
he might get everybody killed.
Reckless. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they really do. They need each other. And that's, you know, on the original series, the main three are, you know, Kirk and his two best friends essentially are Spock and Bones. And so it was really interesting, you know, and in the original series, when it starts, they're already a crew, you know, and then the movies take place after the show. So this is the first time where we've kind of gotten an origin story for the crew and for the main characters. And so I thought they just did, number one, I think they do an amazing job of setting up their relationship, especially with them not liking each other at first, which I think is really cool. But number two, I also love how this is an alternate universe. I love the whole time travel aspect of it and how.
Well, see, yeah, I was watching it with my buddy AJ, and he was saying, "Oh, it's an alternate universe." I'm like, "It is, but it isn't. It's the same universe, but it's a different timeline. It's a splinter off of the main timeline, and it only changed because Nero showed up.
Right, exactly.
And that I thought that was genius.
It is genius. And the fact that they could, because the way they do that allows them to bring in Leonard Nimoy. And the fact that Leonard Nimoy, you know, was a part of the whole plan in the beginning and everything. And he gets sucked through the black hole. Like, I thought it was so smartly written, you know? And I know that, you know, I saw some stuff online about how, like, black holes don't work like that. I'm like, it's Star Trek, you know, like, just have fun with it. You don't think about it too hard.
I made that remark when Spock came through the black hole, or no, not when Spock came through the black hole, when Nero went through the black hole at the beginning of the movie. I was like, that wouldn't work. He'd be dead.
Right.
he would probably be like crushed under the pressure of the black hole. But I was like, you know what? Like you said, it's a Star Trek movie. I'm not going, you know.
It's fun, you know, and I love time travel stories. And I know that, like, this movie's not exactly a time travel movie. There is an element of time travel just because of how Spock and Nero go backwards in time. But yeah, I just thought it was just so well done.
Yes.
It was very, like, and I thought it was really smart on the writers too, to say, you know, we don't want to try to have to conform to the canon of the original series. Like, yes, we want to be, we want to do our best to, you know, make the characters true to their original characters and everything. But it would be, I think they would be painting themselves into a corner too much to try to,
I agree,
say, like, this is the origin and it takes place before the original series and it will fit in with that, you know. It was, so to do this, I thought was really smart to say it's technically a part of that universe, but once this happens, now it's a whole new thing, you know, and anything can happen. And so that's also kind of smart, because obviously none of the main crew die in this or anything, but it could happen because it's a completely, George Kirk is dead. And that didn't happen in the original timeline, Spock tells Kirk that, his father lived in the original timeline and he was the reason he joined Starfleet and stuff like that. So it's it does it raises the stakes a little bit because we actually don't know what could happen to the characters, even though if they were to kill off anybody in the first movie, that'd be kind of crazy. But
yeah, and Spock, Kelvin timeline Spock, he actually mentions that in the scene where he's arguing with Kirk. He's saying, because Nero showed up, he's changed everything. Whatever our destinies were, they're not that anymore. Everything has changed. So now there is a new set. There's new rules now. There's a new set of actions that we couldn't possibly predict.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. One of the things that we also get to see in this movie, and I don't know if this meant anything to you, Stu, since you've only seen these movies, but we get to see Kirk take the Kobayashi Maru, which is referenced in, I believe it started. They don't mention it at all in the original series. I don't think it became a thing until Wrath of Khan.
Okay.
And so in Wrath of Khan, the movie opens up with Kirstie Alley's character taking the Kobayashi Maru and failing it, obviously, because everybody fails it. And we find out later in the film that Kirk is the only one to have beaten it, and I think it might be her. She asks how, and he's like, "I cheated," So, or actually, maybe somebody else says he cheated, and he goes, "I changed the parameters of the test." And so it was kind of cool how we see that happen in this movie. And I love that scene too, where he's very cocky eating the apple, and they're like, their shields are still up. Are they?
He's like, they're attacking. That's cool. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So there's a deleted scene where, and I forget her name because I didn't watch it. I watched it with commentary today, so I didn't hear the dialogue. But the green girl that Zoe Uhura's roommate.
Yeah.
There's a deleted scene that shows that she's the one who like implants the bug in the computer system or whatever. He asks her to do it like at this time tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And apparently that's like the whole reason he's like kind of hooking up with her is because he's using her. And that's the reason they cut it out, is because it made Kirk seem kind of unlikable.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. And then apparently there's another deleted scene later where he's on the Enterprise and he sees another green woman and he thinks it's her. And so he apologizes to her, but then he's like, "You're not," I can't remember what her name is, like Gayla or something. He's like, "You're not Gayla, are you?" And she's like, "No." And so then it like also kind of makes him seem like a jerk because he doesn't even remember who the girl is that helped him cheat. So
it's funny you mentioned that because it made me think of Wonder Woman, the 2009 animated movie. Have you seen that?
That's actually one of the DC movies I have not seen.
I just watched it last night for the first time.
Oh wow! Holy cow!
And not what you just said reminds me of Steve Trevor in that movie. That Steve Trevor is very different.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's almost not likable, but ironically, he's very similar to this version of Kirk.
Interesting.
Who Chris Pine
plays Steve Trevor.
played Steve Trevor. Like that's weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also I don't think this was ever mentioned, so I think they changed this for this movie. But Spock is the one who created the Kobayashi Maru, which I like that. That's how they kind of cross paths. That Kirk cheated on the test, and Spock is made aware of it. And that's why they don't like each other in the beginning, because Kirk cheated on his test, and Spock doesn't like cheaters.
But I mean, Spock made a good point. He was like, the point of the test wasn't to win,
right?
It's
to see how you
experience fear,
right? Yeah, and how you handle a no-win scenario and stuff. So
right.
That is.
But Kirk doesn't believe in no-win situation,
right? So he is the only one to have beaten the Kobayashi Maru, although
to have beaten.
Yeah, technically, yeah. Starfleet Academy is, so when you see like Bones and Kirk coming down the stairs, that's when he's like telling him he's going to take the test again. Yeah. That is California. Let's see if I can get this right. California State University Northridge, CSUN, which is where my wife got her second master's degree. So I've been to that building with the stairs. It's actually the library of the school.
Nice.
And so I remember.
This takes place in San Francisco?
It does. Yep.
Okay.
And so a lot of that scene, like the stairs in that building is real, but then like the background of that is all CGI because it's yeah. I mean, at one point they turn and you see like the skyline of San Francisco, and I'm pretty sure there's like another building there in real life.
Yeah.
Like another school building. Yeah. But I remember going with her one time to the library, and I had to take a picture of the steps. I was like, I'm at Starfleet Academy.
That's awesome.
And when they get onto the Enterprise, there's a couple of I'll see if I'll try to remember the scenes. If I see it while I'm talking, I'll point it out. But they shot in like the Budweiser factory, which was in Los Angeles as well. And so they talked about in the commentary how I guess the smell in there is not great. So they didn't really like.
I could imagine.
Yeah, they didn't really enjoy shooting in there, but it has a cool look to it.
Yeah, it smells like old beer.
Yeah, I imagine. It's probably not fun. I also love too. I know it's kind of a silly sequence, but it makes me laugh every time how Kirk ends up getting onto the Enterprise. Because he's been grounded essentially because of his what's it called? The inquiry into his cheating.
Yeah. So
Bones injects him with can't remember if it's like a vaccine or something, but it's supposed to provide the symptoms of whatever it is that, and so that way he's under his care and can get him onto the Enterprise.
Right.
And I love that he keeps hitting him with the hypo spray, which has apparently never really hurt anybody. And if you watch the old series or you watch Next Generation, anytime anybody uses one of those things, it's like painless. But in this movie, he's always like, but then he's got the big hands and everything, and numb tongue. That part cracks me up every time. Yeah. Numb tongue. I love it.
That part I liked it, but it did feel a little cartoony. Yeah, I was like, I like it. I like it on its own, but I don't know if I like it in conjunction to the rest of the film.
Doesn't maybe quite fit tonally.
Not quite.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'm watching the scene right now where they're all getting on the shuttles to go to their, respective, is that the right word? Anyway, they're going to their spaceships.
Yeah.
Everybody dies because Enterprise gets a late start. And so by the time Enterprise gets there, all those other ships are completely destroyed by Nero. So like everybody in this scene goes to their death.
Yikes.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's something I didn't think about the first time I watched it, but like watching it again, because you see her roommate, Gayla, I think her name is, she turns around to Uhura and like kind of gives like a thumbs up, like, yeah, I'm assigned to the Franklin or whatever it was. She's dead. Because everybody shows up before the Enterprise and they all are blown to smithereens.
That's sad.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, Sulu saved everybody's life, because if he had not removed the inertial dampener or whatever it was that he didn't take off, they would have jumped to warp right away and arrived when everybody else did.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's crazy. One thing that I thought was missing, because they do a 3-year time jump from the time Kirk agrees to
go to Starfleet,
go to Starfleet until he's taking the test for the third time.
Right.
I would have liked to have seen a montage of him in Starfleet.
Yeah.
Just something quick, because not to make the movie much longer, because I do think this is a very well paced movie.
Yeah.
But just a little like quick montage. Maybe if is it on the deleted scenes at all? Or?
Not that I know of. I don't think it was. I think it was always just a 3 years later title card, and they just kind of skipped over it.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that.
That would have been kind of cool, seeing him in class or something, and
yeah,
and learning. I mean, I assume obviously there's it's kind of like the military where you have like a specialty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like Sulu's the helmsman, Bones is obviously medical, Spock is a science officer. I'd be curious to know what Kirk's like specialty was. If what, or if he was just kind of like in the officers program type of thing.
I would say, I guess something that has to do with strategy,
right?
Yeah, because he's very good, especially in Into Darkness. He's very good at deciphering the enemy's strategy.
Yeah. So that would have been kind of cool to see, him at Starfleet kind of learning that stuff, like you said, maybe a little bit of a montage part. I love the costumes in this movie. I'm at the part now. Well, number one, seeing the Enterprise for the first time. I love that shot.
Yes.
And I listen, and on the commentary, J.J. Abrams talks about how that was like kind of his homage to Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which has I'm not kidding, it's like 5 minutes long of Kirk in a shuttlecraft, like seeing the Enterprise for the first time. And it's amazing, but it, like by today's standards, it's way too long. But it's because, I mean, I can't imagine being a Star Trek fan in the 70s. Star Trek went off the air in like 69 or something. 10 years later, they finally made a movie of it, and you go to see it, and you see the Enterprise for the first time on the big screen. Like, I understand why they made it 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
But it is a long sequence of them just looking at the Enterprise and
that.
All these different shots
now that you think of it, that would be awesome to see the
it would be
to
very,
see the Enterprise
cool.
on the big screen for the first time. That kind of gave me chills.
It's my favorite scene in the movie, in the motion picture, just because it is such a. I mean, the music is great, and you see the, and you just kind of, if you think about it in those terms, like seeing it on, and I've never seen it on the big screen, but seeing it on the big screen and seeing the Enterprise like that big and in that detail.
Yeah. The only thing that I can think of that comes close like that to in my lifetime is seeing the Shield helicarrier in Avengers.
Oh yeah.
Because that scene was awesome. That's one of my favorite scenes to watch when I'm at home on my big screen TV.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And because of the aspect ratio, it fills up the whole screen.
Right.
And it just
it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
And that's how I feel about this shot of the Enterprise. I mean, when they first see it, Kirk and Bones are looking out the window and they first see the Enterprise, like, that's a great shot.
Yeah.
And the music is great.
The cinematography in this movie is excellent. J.J. Abrams really did a great job directing this film.
I agree. And I know the movie gets a lot of crap for the lens flares. I think it works.
In this movie, yes. In this movie, I love it.
Yeah.
It bothers me in some of his other stuff, like Super 8. It's way too many lens flares in Super 8. But here, it fits the aesthetic of the movie and it looks good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I never once in the theater thought, okay, it's too many lens flares. You know what I mean? Like,
I never got distracted.
No, never.
Yeah.
Never. And maybe some other people do, but for me, never. And I started to say this, but I love the costumes in this movie. I love that they look very similar to the original series costumes, but updated. I think that, it's one of my favorite things about this film is that they did such a great job with the costumes. And I like too that they have not just the blue, yellow, and red regular costumes, but they also have like, there's like the cadet uniforms, and then they've got like when Kirk and Sulu and the red shirt go to the drill, they've got like their kind of jumpsuit stuff, and even though it's in the same colors and everything.
Right.
So I just think they did a fantastic job with it. They changed it a little bit for Beyond, where they made it kind of like a higher collar, which is fine, but I think I like this better.
I prefer it in this movie as well.
Yeah. Speaking of cinematography, I'm going to jump forward a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
That scene where Sulu and Kirk and the red shirt jump down to the drill, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that they shot this. I don't know if you know this, Stu, but like, I don't know why they ended up doing it this way. They kind of mentioned it in the commentary. Like, I think they originally were planning on trying to do something else, and then they realized the best way to do it was they went out into like a parking lot, and they put a big mirror on the ground, and they had Chris Pine and John Cho the camera was above, shooting down at the mirror, and they had Chris Pine and John Cho stand on the mirror and look up, and then they just shook the camera. And so the sky was being reflected in the mirror, and they just stood there and they were like, I'm, pretending to fall through the air.
That's awesome.
And obviously mixed in with the CG shots and everything. It looks, it's incredible. Like there's on the Blu-ray, there's a special feature, and you see them, especially the part where Kirk goes to try to save Sulu because he fell off. He doesn't have a parachute, and then Kirk's parachute breaks, and they're just kind of hanging on to each other. It's just Chris Pine and John Cho like hugging each other and like turning on the mirror while the camera like shakes. So they're just standing there, which I think is fantastic. But I just thought
that's awesome though.
And I don't think I would have ever thought of that. Like, well, why don't we just put a mirror on the ground and have them stand on the mirror, and we'll shoot down so we see the reflection of the sky, and then we'll just kind of shake the camera to give that, feeling of movement and stuff. And I thought it was just ingenious. It's just incredible to me.
That sounds like something Steven Spielberg would do.
Yeah, maybe.
He's good at figuring things out along the way. Like, with Jaws, the shark wouldn't work. He's like, okay, let's just not show the shark. That's scarier.
Right.
And then it proceeded to be one of the most genius decisions in movie history.
Cinema history,
and now everybody does it.
and it's we should do an episode on Jaws. We haven't done one on Jaws. That the fact that the shark never worked was like the greatest, even though at the time I'm sure it felt like such a curse. Yeah. But it was like the greatest blessing that could have ever happened to Steven Spielberg, because not showing that shark pretty much until the end of the movie was the scariest thing he could have done, I think.
It's because he left it up to your imagination.
Yep, exactly.
You didn't know what it looked like, so whatever you thought it looked like, that's what it looked like.
Yeah. And it just, and you'd get like a glimpse, like they'd show the fin or something occasionally, right? And then you'd see the person on the raft getting, the kid on the raft or whatever it was.
Even without the fin, like just John Williams' score. Like,
and the camera being like the shark's POV type of thing.
You knew the shark was you knew the shark was there even without seeing it. But it would, like I said, that was one of the greatest decisions in cinematic history.
Oh yeah.
And this definitely feels it makes sense. It makes sense for J.J. Abrams to kind of operate like that.
It's interesting
he's very similar
to
Spielberg in a lot of ways as far as his like cinematography.
I agree. I remember thinking that when I watched Super 8, that Super 8 felt very Spielbergian.
Yeah.
To coin a phrase, I guess. JJ hasn't really done has he done an original film since Super 8? Because he did Star Wars, and that's all he's been doing lately, right? I don't think he's had an
original film since Super 8.
Like, he did this movie, he did Into Darkness, then he did Star Wars Force Awakens. Well, he did Super 8 sometime in there, and then he did, I think he did this movie, then Super 8, then Into Darkness. And then he did Star Wars Force Awakens, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, but I don't think he's directed anything since then or in between those. Or at least not that I recall.
I don't think so. He's been, I don't know.
Well, he made so much money off Star Wars, he probably doesn't need.
There's always rumors that he's gonna be directing another movie, but then once we hear it, we don't hear about it ever.
Yeah, you
again.
don't hear about it anymore. It's true.
Like he's still supposed to be making a Superman movie. That's been rumored for like 10 years.
That's true. Well,
longer
Warner
than
Brothers,
that actually.
Now that you mention it, I think I remember reading that like Bad Robot had signed a deal with Warner Brothers for something, but I think that got canceled because of the whole merger. Now everything's been canceled with Warner Brothers.
I heard they were frustrated with him because he wasn't
producing
doing
anything. Yeah. So anyway, I just looked it up. No, he has not directed anything original since Super 8.
But that's I mean that's the thing with because he was kind of like the I don't want to say the Kevin Feige, but he was like in between. I don't know. He was kind of like the head of Star Wars,
right,
at the time. So I could see that consuming a lot of his time
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I know the original plan was he was only going to do episode 7, and then Rian Johnson did episode 8, and then it was going to be Colin Trevorrow who was going to do 9 until he got parted ways, creative differences,
right?
And so then they brought J.J. back. So yeah, I mean, doing 2 Star Wars movies, I'm sure it takes up quite a bit of your time, and I'm sure after doing 2 Star Wars movies, you kind of probably want to take a little break. So I can imagine, even after doing this movie and Into Darkness, I imagine would be kind of tough. You know, these are big budget spectacle movies, not quite Star Wars level, but it's, you know, they're pretty big. One person we haven't talked about yet is Nero, Eric Bana.
Yeah, I like Nero. I don't love him.
Yeah,
but I like him.
One thing I like about him is he's a he's you know, he's not a scientist or anything. He's just like he's a miner who is upset that his planet got destroyed, and he holds a grudge against Spock, and it's a, you know, kind of a revenge story for him.
Yeah.
But I like that he's just, it's like almost like a blue collar worker who just
you stole the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. He's just a regular guy.
Right.
Going up against Starfleet.
Right. Granted, he's got a huge ship, but it's not, and it does have weapons on it and stuff, but it's supposed to be a mining ship, which obviously allows them to have that huge drill and everything. But
it makes sense the way the ship is designed. It's kind of designed to like cut through elements.
Earth.
So so it makes sense. I like that.
I really like Eric Bana's performance a lot. I think he does a great job. One of my favorite scenes is when he first talks to Captain Pike. He's like, I'm Captain Christopher Pike from the USS Enterprise. He goes, "Hi, Chris, I'm Nero." You know, it's just like, it's very like kind of casual or whatever.
Well, see, I think that's the thing that I don't really care for. I wanted him to be a little bit more menacing. The humor can still be there, but yeah, he's not quite as menacing. I guess the kind of thing that I'm looking for is kind of like Loki. Loki was humorous,
right,
but he was menacing at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, I can get that. I mean, Eric Bana, I think he's got I mean, they cast a great actor to do it. I think
yes, Eric Bana is underrated,
right?
Very underrated.
And I think if they had gotten a lesser actor, it would have been even worse. I mean, not saying that it was bad, but it was just like you were saying. Like if they had gotten a lesser actor, he would have been even less menacing, perhaps.
Yes,
you know. Because I do think he comes across decently menacing, especially when he's like torturing Captain Pike, trying to get the information out of him and stuff. And I think he's physically, his presence is kind of intimidating. I do wonder why. I've never really bothered to kind of Google it or anything, but I do wonder why they chose to have the Romulans be tattooed in this movie. Like have the tattoos on their faces?
I think it's because they are very similar to Vulcans. I understand they have a similar ancestor.
Yeah.
So they wanted to have another like clear differentiation.
Distinction.
Yeah.
I gotcha. That, and I guess to people who have not ever seen Star Trek, that makes sense. So, because, and at the time, I don't know if I'd ever gotten to any Romulan episodes in the original series, and now that I've watched TNG, I've seen plenty of Romulan episodes, and none of them have tattoos anywhere in the series. So I was curious as to why they decided to do that.
Do they look similar to Vulcans?
They do. They, in the TV shows, they always kind of like have more distinct brows. Like it's almost like they put makeup under the eyebrows and kind of like protrude their foreheads forward a little bit, I think. So there is that kind of distinction. And their clothing is different. They have like this weird boxy kind of, like their shoulders are really super boxy and stuff. But actually, the actor who played Spock's dad on the original series, the first episode he was in, he played a Romulan. And I guess they just really liked that actor, and so they decided to bring him back to be Spock's dad.
Yeah.
But that makes sense to me, though, to say, like, okay, we don't want the audience to confuse these guys for Vulcans, so let's give them these tattoos, and we'll say that it's like a Romulan thing. So, yeah, that works for me. I mean, it never has bothered me. I just was always curious why they decided to do it, and that explanation makes total sense to me. I love the red shirt gag. I think even, did you know about that, even not really being a Star Trek fan?
Loosely, refresh my memory.
Well, basically, red shirts always die. So, like, on the original series, it would be like Kirk, Spock, and then maybe another character, maybe another main actor, and then it would be like basically background actors who go to the surface of the planet, and they're not going to kill off William Shatner. They're not going to kill off Leonard Nimoy. It's going to be these nameless guys in the background, and they always had a red costume on.
Yeah.
And so it became a thing where like the red shirts always die. And so I loved that was a joke in the movie, that the red shirt, the guy in the red costume is the one that doesn't pull his chute until the last second and ends up killing himself.
Of course.
So that made me laugh in the theater. I appreciated that. I also like, there's an episode in the original series called The Naked. I get it confused because Next Generation basically did the exact same episode. One of them is called The Naked Now. One of them is called The Naked Time. I think I don't remember. Anyway, but basically they come across some sort of like substance or something that makes everybody on the Enterprise kind of act drunk. And so in that episode, Sulu goes shirtless down the hallways of the Enterprise with I guess they're called rapiers for fencing, and like tries to like fence people and stuff. And so that's where the fencing joke comes from in this movie. What kind of combat have you trained in? Fencing. Although the sword fighting he does in this movie, I don't think is fencing. It's very, it's like he's got like some martial arts skills. Clearly, he's doing all these sorts of flips.
I was gonna say it's kind of like samurai or something.
Yeah. It's cool though. I like it, and I like the sword that like, unfolds. Whatever. I thought that was pretty neat too.
The score.
Yes. Michael Giacchino, man.
Michael Giacchino
kills it.
Oh, this score is perfection. Like
it really is.
There's nothing wrong with it. I love everything about it. It's like, it's bombastic and like it's got a lot of fanfare, but it's also like hopeful. It feels so right and matches the tone of this movie perfectly.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of the, like, I bought this soundtrack when this movie came out, and I've listened to this score so many times.
Yeah,
it is so good, and he does a fantastic job of creating a new theme for this film, but also incorporating kind of the old school Star Trek theme, which plays in full over the end credits.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Like, because he uses the OG theme as the intro to the new theme.
Right?
It's genius.
It works so well, and like the opening music, when you see the title, after the Kelvin scene, and it's that slow kind of reveal of the word Star Trek. That music that plays there is just so perfect. It's like chilling almost. It's so good.
It is.
Yeah, Michael Giacchino knocked it out of the park with this one. I mean,
absolutely.
I love this.
Honestly, it's one of his best.
I agree.
I would say this, Spider-Man. The third one was just in my head.
The Batman.
Incredibles.
Oh, Incredibles.
Yeah, Incredibles. Yeah. I think I was gonna say the Batman, but John and I kind of have the same issue. The main motif played a little bit too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
It's
so
still,
that's why it's not in my top 3.
I got you. Yeah. No worries. That worked. One score I just thought of that might be in my top 3 of Michael Giacchino is Up. That Pixar score, with the whole montage of Ellie and I can't remember his name now. The main character, like them going through their life. Carl, yeah. Going through their life. He won an Oscar for that music, I'm pretty sure.
He did? Oh.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Michael Giacchino won Best Original Score for Up. I mean, that music was incredible. Yeah, he's been nominated twice. Once for Ratatouille and once for Up, and he won for Up. It's crazy that he's only been nominated twice. I thought he had been nominated way more than that.
Yeah, I mean he's the new gold standard on scores right now. He's especially for superhero movies. He's dominating for superhero movies.
Yeah, I mean Hans Zimmer I think does a great job with superhero movies too, even though I know he's kind of wanting to get away from superhero movies, yet he still keeps getting pulled back. Because
he always does a great job. Because Dark Phoenix does not deserve
but had an
the
amazing
score that it has.
I agree.
I'm not necessarily in the camp that Dark Phoenix is a terrible movie. It's not good, but I understand what they were trying to do with that movie.
I got you. I don't. I've only seen it once, and I'm looking forward to rewatching. Well, am I really looking forward to rewatching it? But I'm looking forward to doing an episode on it.
I think that movie is massively improved by a villain change.
Okay. I remember sitting in the theater thinking the only good thing about this movie is this music. I didn't buy the entire soundtrack for that one, but I did buy like the first track, which is like 8 minutes long or something.
Yeah.
And it is really good. Like you said, the movie doesn't deserve
it. It doesn't deserve it.
But Michael Giacchino, you're talking about J.J. Abrams being like Spielberg. Michael Giacchino kind of reminds me of John Williams. I think he's. I wouldn't go so far to say he's the next John Williams, but he's the closest that we've had. I can agree with that because I think like the big four, they all kind of have their own distinctive styles. The big four is my big four is John Williams, Hans Zimmer, Danny Elfman, and Alan Silvestri. Yeah.
So they
Alan Silvestri's pretty close. He's had some good stuff too that's very John Williams-esque.
Yes.
A lot of people think John Williams did Back to the Future, but it's actually Alan Silvestri. So he's definitely had some Forrest Gump, that's another amazing Alan Silvestri. Yeah, he definitely belongs in the top 4 for sure. But Michael Giacchino, there's a few times, listening to his music where you're just like, this feels very John Williams-esque, and it's just
that's how I feel about his Spider-Man. His Spider-Man score, like that main motif definitely sounds John Williamsy, and especially like if you listen closely, you can hear the xylophones in the background, which is a very like John Williams thing to do.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. So 2 big things I kind of want to talk about before we run out of time here is the destruction of Vulcan, because that was a huge moment.
Yes.
And Kirk getting kicked off of the Enterprise and meeting Spock Prime. So clearly Vulcan was not destroyed in the original timeline.
No.
And this is something Nero did, and I love the scene between Spock and Chekhov, where Chekhov basically turns around to Spock. Spock is the acting captain of the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And Chekhov says, he's creating a black hole. It's going to consume the planet. And Spock, still is kind of doing that emotionless type thing, but he's also like, really? And he goes,
he's like, contemplating what he said. Yeah.
Right. And he goes, well, how long does the planet have? And Anton Yelchin just does, it's just a simple thing, but he does such a good job just going, minutes. Minutes. and Spock immediately just jumps out of his chair and like runs to go to the transporter, so that he can get down there and save his parents.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that moment. I don't. It's just so well done. I thought
it is. No, I agree. I'm thinking about it now, and it's just I'm sorry, Zachary Quinto stole the show.
He does a fantastic job. I agree.
He does a great job, man.
It really is
and it doesn't feel like because I always had it in my head like maybe like Spock was kind of Kirk's sidekick,
right?
I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it doesn't feel that way in this movie at all. They are they're equal,
right? Yeah.
Because they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess strong.
They complement each other.
Yeah,
so much.
They complement each other so much. But it's almost kind of like an unstoppable force and an immovable object. It's
right.
They're not really. One isn't greater than the other. Even though Chris Pine is top billed, his Zachary Quinto's performance and Spock's writing, it just goes toe to toe with Kirk and Chris Pine as Kirk.
Right. No, I 100% agree. I think they on the original show, I believe they are like all three of them, Kirk, Spock, and Bones. They're all kind of equals, even though Kirk is the captain. And there are times in the show, I believe, where Kirk or Spock doesn't necessarily agree with Kirk, and Kirk says like, "This is what we're doing," because he's the captain, so he's got last say.
Right.
But they are very much and he treats Spock and Bones that way. He values
absolutely.
their opinion and their advice and stuff like that. And so,
I remember in Into Darkness, he does that. If Spock and I had switched places, what do you think he would do?
Yeah,
he's like, no, Spock,
he'd let you die.
He'd let you die.
Right. I do like that moment. Yeah. So I think you're right. Absolutely right. They did it fit, and like it feels believable to me too that they respect each other in the end, because we're skipping over the Spock Prime part. When Kirk gets back on the ship, it works so well to me that Spock is the one that says, "I've been emotionally compromised. I have to step down." It's like, rather than having somebody else say, "Hey, you're unfit to command."
Yeah.
He
I'm
realizes
taking over
it
the ship for himself. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I think it works so well. And because of that, it's like Spock, he kind of forces himself to take a back seat, and he can kind of see Kirk do what he does. And they kind of have that they end up having that kind of mutual respect for each other.
That's a pivotal moment in the film. Like, as far as like Spock's character development.
Yep.
Like that's definitely a very, very important moment for Spock, because he, like you said, he sees it for himself and realizes, maybe I should take a back seat and see what happens when somebody else is leading, because just because I'm logical all the time,
right,
but that doesn't necessarily override my emotion.
Right. Well, and that's, I think, part of the reason why he decides to do it himself, because he knows it is logical. He realizes like, okay, I can't do this. I have been emotionally compromised. I am Starfleet regulations say blah 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 blah, so this is what I must do. It's just he's so by the book that he knows that he has to step down, basically.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool, I think. So going backwards a little bit, Kirk is kicked off the ship. and ends up on this ice planet and gets chased by a giant monster that has a J.J. Abrams feel to it. It looks very similar to kind of like the Cloverfield monster or the Super 8 monster even, it has very really similar features.
That monster reminds me of a video game called Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. And there is it's a side scroller on the PS1.
Oh, okay.
And there's a monster, like some kind of creature called a scrab, I think. And it looks very similar to that. Not quite as big, but it kind of stands upright, but it looks very similar to that thing.
I'd be curious to know if the designer of this creature also maybe did some design work for that game or something.
I'll have to look that up after this recording.
I used to not really like that moment with that creature just because we had never really seen a creature like that really in anything Star Trek, at least not that I had. And I think, now that I've seen the whole series, now granted, I don't remember every episode in detail, but I don't think, especially on the 60s episodes, there was nothing because they didn't have that.
They didn't have the means.
They didn't have the means to do something like that. So I don't think we'd ever really seen anything like that. It doesn't bother me now. It's cool. And it's such a short sequence. It's not really that big of a deal. It gets him into the cave and Spock can kind of save the day.
Yeah.
But the reveal of Leonard Nimoy, because I don't, seeing this in the theater, I don't think I knew Leonard Nimoy was in it. And so seeing him turn around and we see Leonard Nimoy's face, the whole theater went nuts, man. It was such a cool moment. And he was like, James Tiberius Kirk. And then, of course, Chris Pine has a great line there. He's like, I am Spock. And I can't repeat it on the podcast, but he has a great little curse there. It's like a perfect use of that word, I think.
Yes.
For that cut. But I love the whole scene with Spock talking to Kirk and then mind melding with him. And so then we see what happened. Pieces of the puzzle start getting put together for us. And we realize Nero was from the future. Romulus was in danger. Spock said, well, maybe I can help. I can't remember if he didn't get there in time or something didn't happen right. And Romulus gets destroyed. And, and Nero and Spock got sucked into the past. Well, one of the things I loved about it was, Nero gets sucked. He gets sent basically farther into the past.
Yeah.
Destroys the Kelvin. And he's there for like 25 years.
25 years, yep. And
then Spock Prime shows up, which I like how he says, what had been years for Nero was seconds for me, which I thought was really, really cool. It's just, I just love that element of it. Speaking of the whole 25 years thing, there's apparently some deleted scenes where Nero's crew, when the Kelvin slams into Nero's ship, it sends that ship into the neutral zone, it's then found by Klingons. And apparently Nero's crew becomes Klingon prisoners for like 20 years or something. And I don't know how they get out or if they escape or what. But that's why in the beginning of the movie, Nero's ears are normal. But then later when we see him, when it's jumped forward 25 years, he's got like a huge bite mark and part of his ear is missing because apparently that happened in like the Klingon prison camp.
Oh, wow.
And they said part of the reason why they cut it out was because it made it kind of confusing for audiences. They were like, wait, is this the bad guy or the Klingon's the bad guy? And so they couldn't really, so they just got rid of it.
Yeah.
And so it was always kind of a mystery, like what happened to him? Why is part of his ear missing now? And so apparently it happened in the Klingon prison, which I think is kind of interesting. But
that is interesting.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I love that. I love number one that Leonard Nimoy is in this movie. That just the fact, the way that ties it to the original series and the original universe, I think is so amazing. And then, like I said earlier, the way that they decided to do it with the whole time travel thing and everything, it's just it's incredible.
He's the reason the movie is happening.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. There's a comic book that was like a prequel comic book called Star Trek Countdown. And it takes place obviously before this.
Right.
But it's actually technically in the future. because it deals with Spock Prime and Nero and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they mentioned that Spock's spaceship, the jellyfish, was designed and built, I guess, by Geordi LaForge from Next Generation, which I thought was kind of cool. Yeah. The jellyfish I always thought was kind of a cool looking ship too, with the way that like the back kind of spun and stuff. Very neat. I'm seeing the mind meld scene right now.
Yeah, mine has been off for
I know your credits have.
I'm just looking at the menu.
Even if you're not a Star Trek fan, I feel like we've always heard set phasers to stun, which also is in Star Wars. You know, I remember when Leia gets in the very first in A New Hope. I think one of the stormtroopers says something about set your phasers to stun. I don't remember if it says phasers, but he says something about setting up to stun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always knew that Star Trek phasers had the kill setting and the stun setting. But seeing it in this movie where it actually clicks from red to blue, and then clicks back, that was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. I remember in the theater just being like, "Oh!" Like, I just thought that was so amazing. I love the whole plan. You know, and one of the things I love too is that whenever they create a black hole, they're using the tiniest amount of red matter. Whereas at the end, when Spock flies the ship into I forget what Nero's ship is called, but it's the entire thing. I mean, it would just be the biggest black hole of all time, probably. But but it really works, I think, in my opinion. And I love how the Enterprise shows up at the end. It comes out of warp and fires its phasers. It was that whole last sequence, I think, is just incredible. It works so well. Once they have, saved the day and Nero is destroyed, Spock at the end of the movie meets his older self. And I like that scene between them, and I love how Spock says, my customary farewell would be oddly self-serving. And so he just says, I'll say good luck. It's not super noticeable, but Zachary Quinto apparently couldn't do the Vulcan salute with his right hand.
Yeah, I read that. They had to like glue his fingers together.
I waited on the commentary to see if they'd mention it because I'd heard it and I was like, maybe it's a rumor. But J.J. Abrams flat out says we had to glue his fingers together because he couldn't do the salute with his right hand. I can do it with my right hand.
That's unfortunate.
I can't do it with my left hand, but I can do it with my right hand. So if it was
I guess I'm weird.
No, I feel like I had to kind of teach myself to do it with my right hand. I couldn't do it for the longest time. So maybe I'll have to just try to teach myself how to do it with the left hand, but it's hard.
Don't hurt yourself.
I know, it's hard. It hurts. Chris Pine, real quick, I think does a fantastic job of making Kirk his own, but also kind of there's a couple of moments where he throws in a little bit of Shatner. Yeah. And the biggest moment of that, I think, is the very end when he walks onto the Enterprise and he kind of looks and he's all happy. And he goes bones, like that's just the way he says bones is just very Shatner to me. Yeah. So I thought he did it. Chris Pine, like I said, I'd only seen him in Smokin' Aces before that, and it was a smaller role. It was also a much different role. He impressed me so much in this movie. I mean, I thought he was incredible in this film. He's perfect as Kirk. It was perfect casting.
Chris Pine is really good. He's really good. I mean, he's good as Steve Trevor. I just watched him in Hell or High Water.
Oh, that's a great movie.
That's a great movie. He's excellent in that.
He is very good in that. I'm looking forward to seeing him in the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, that Dungeons and Dragons movie looks pretty fun.
Yeah, I hope it's good. But no, I'm a Chris Pine fan. John and I have talked about how I think it was before he played Steve Trevor, it would have been kind of cool to have him be Hal Jordan.
Yeah, I was just listening to that episode today.
Yeah, I think he would have done a good job. But now that he's been Steve Trevor, I don't think it would work. And he's getting older too, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Chris Pine. I like watching him. I think he's a good actor. He does a great job. Did you ever see the movie This Means War? It was Chris Pine and Tom Hardy and Reese Witherspoon.
No,
it's kind of a romantic action comedy.
Yeah, I know of it. I haven't seen it though. I remember seeing seeing a preview for it. I'm like, what is this, like a live action spy versus spy?
Basically. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And it got real bad reviews. But I actually kind of like it. It's kind of, maybe it's a guilty pleasure, but like I had fun watching it. I thought it was actually pretty good. One person we didn't talk about really is Scotty, and I love his introduction, how he's been stowed away on this station on the ice planet, you know, because he accidentally sent Admiral Archer's dog somewhere. Which is a nice reference to Enterprise, Admiral Archer, you know, because I know Enterprise has Captain Archer, even though I haven't really seen it. So I like that. I like that moment. There's also a Tribble, I guess, in that scene where he's introduced. Simon Pegg is another one. So when he was cast as Scotty, I just remember thinking, like, really? I don't know. But he's I can't imagine anybody else playing Scotty now. He's so good.
Like I said, I didn't see the OG, so I can't really
compare. Yeah. And James Doohan wasn't Scottish in real life. He was American, and he was good at doing voices, and so he did Scottish. And same thing with Walter Koenig. He just did the Russian accent for whatever. But I can't remember if they wanted him to be Russian. I don't remember, but he faked the Russian accent. So it's not like I feel like it needed to be a Scottish actor. I just couldn't see Simon Pegg as Scotty for some reason. But again, once I saw the movie, I was like, never mind, I was wrong.
Sold.
Yeah.
Well, you want to get in the ratings?
Sure. So I was going, before we started recording, I had thought about what my rating was going to be, and I was going to give it 4.5 stars. But talking about it, I don't think I can. Yeah, I don't think I can deny that it's a 5-star movie to me. I mean, it is. I really can't think of anything that I would fault in the film. I think it's pretty much. I mean, like you said, it's paced super well. The acting is on point across the board. The score is amazing. The cinematography is good. The direction's good. I can pop this movie on and pretty much watch it from beginning to end anytime.
I feel that. I mean, I've watched this movie 3 times in the last 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and it doesn't really get old. It's fantastic. So for me, I'm gonna give this 5 out of 5. I don't know. Starfleet badges. I don't know. I should come up with these things beforehand.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I don't have any nostalgia for the Star Trek world or the Star Trek universe, but that being said, this movie is very fun, and it definitely feels like it captures the essence of the characters. Like I said, I haven't seen the OGs, but it just it feels right.
Right.
It feels like they did the franchise right.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it among other things, it's well shot. The score is fantastic. There were a few points in the movie where I felt like the humor was a little bit too much.
That's right. Yeah, you said that. Yeah.
But other than that, I'm right there with you. I don't see many flaws. I'm gonna give it 4.5 Enterprises.
Nice. That's awesome. I would be so. Unfortunately, John couldn't join us this episode, so we'll have to find out what his score is and maybe put it in the notes or something. But
yeah.
But I'm curious because I know he loved Into Darkness, and like I said, I started listening to our Into Darkness episode because I couldn't remember, what we had talked about really, and just from listening to that, he seemed to like Into Darkness more than this film. So I'd be curious if he would give it 4.5 or if it'd be lower than that. I don't think he'd give it a 5-star rating like I did, but who knows? I could be wrong.
Yeah, John tends to reserve his 5s for
his 5s are like for Jurassic Park
classic,
and that's it. No, I'm sure there's other movies that he gives 5 stars to, but he doesn't give out 5 stars very, very often.
No.
He's usually pretty strict about it. And I've tried to be a little bit more strict myself, but this movie, I can't deny it. Because the humor for me works. I like, the swollen hands and stuff, which I know you mentioned doesn't quite work for you, works for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the scene right now watching it on my TV where Scotty's in the water tubes going towards the tanks. That works for me. I think that's funny.
Yeah, that's another one where it kind of felt like a cartoon.
Right, yeah. So yeah, for me, I it's a 5-star movie, I think, for me. I love this movie.
Yeah, my 5 stars, I guess I'm in between you and John, because I'm not quite as strict as John. Because
what are you saying? I give 5 stars like willy nilly? No, I'm just kidding.
No, you don't. I try. It kind of seems redundant to say it, but I kind of judge the movie the for what it is.
Yeah.
And specific movies have certain goals to achieve depending on the kind of movie it is. So, if that movie meets or exceeds those goals, it's got to be a 4.5 or a 5, even if it's not a certified classic.
Right.
For example, Men in Black. I don't think many people consider that a classic amongst all-time movies, maybe for that particular era, but that movie, while not considered a classic, does everything that it's supposed to do. So I personally had to give it a 5 out of 5.
Oh yeah, I definitely
for the same reason you gave this a 5 out of it. It's nearly flawless.
Yeah, and I like how you said that about how does it do what it set out to do, basically. And I remember Roger Ebert had a similar comment or whatever about movies, because I think that somebody may have come to him and said, like, how could you give this movie a perfect score? I don't remember what they did back then, if he did A+ or if he did 5 stars or whatever. I know they did 2 thumbs up for their show, but because he wrote articles for newspaper and stuff.
Yeah. And
they're like, how could you give this movie a perfect score, and this movie a perfect score? These two movies, this movie is clearly better than, he was like, you can't compare the movies. Like, obviously this movie is a better movie, but this movie did exactly what it set out to do. And it did it well, and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And so
I didn't even know he said that, and that's exactly how I kind of approach my ratings with movies.
Right, and that's how I feel like I should do it too. I think there's sometimes I get held back because I think, well, I can't give this movie 5 stars. I gave The Godfather 5 stars. It's like, and this isn't like The Godfather. And I think that's what John does, and maybe John can speak to this. Obviously, I don't want to speak for John, but I believe we've had this conversation where John reserves his 5-star movies for movies that I think will go down, in his opinion anyway, as like the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, Jurassic Park, Empire Strikes Back.
Right, exactly. Stuff like that. And so I don't see him giving this one 5 stars, but like I said, I could be wrong. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But yeah. Well, we'd love to know what you think about Star Trek. You can always leave us a comment on cinemaheroes.com, or you can tweet at us on Twitter at cinemaheroes. Same thing with Instagram, same handle. You can always leave us a comment on this YouTube video if you've been watching it on YouTube. If you are watching it on YouTube, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you however you want to reach out to us. But I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And if you are watching on YouTube, leave us a I can't speak tonight. It's the beer. If you are
That's
watching,
the post-credit scene right there.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah.